So what we saw in the video is the basic foundation of economics, the ideas of supply and demand. These are the basic general principles that theoretically dictate our decisions. They have a relationship to each other that is proportional, again, in general, in theory. The idea is that when there's a greater supply of something available, so there's just more of that thing, the demand for it will decrease. If it's easier to get, why would I pay more for it? The inverse is true when there is a lower supply. When there is less of something, it is more rare, it is harder to get, and thus the demand for it increases. An example of this could be anything that Kanye West sells, right? If there are only 200 pairs of the Kanye West shoes available, they are exceedingly rare, and thus people are willing to pay more money for them. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone pay for those shoes? Well, that's the very idea. Is because they are so hard to get, they inherently have more value. That's kind of the theory of supply and demand. Now, it seems strange to talk about it with shoes, right? Because shoes are not necessary to live. An easier example would be something like bananas, a food that most people like. For our sake, let's pretend everyone likes them. If there are more bananas available and the supermarket has more of them, they can assume that people don't want to pay as much as they would as if they were harder to get. So when we look at this supply and demand curve, as you'll often see, I know we call it a curve, even though the lines aren't curved. When you get into more advanced economics, sometimes they'll be presented as curves. For our sake, they're straight lines. You'll see the supply line, the one labeled with an S, is heading upward as you move along the X and Y axes. The value is increasing. So as you have more things, in general, the demand, so the D labeled line, decreases. Now this point where they intersect, that is the price. So theoretically, the place where the supply matches the demand, the place where people are willing to pay this much for the products and you have that many products, that sets the price. So if the supply were to decrease and we were to take this S line and move it to the left, so overall less of a supply, then that price, the point where they intersect, in theory, if you imagine sliding that line over but keeping the demand line the same, the price would increase. So there's still just as many people that want that thing, but there's less of it. So people are able to raise the price, and because that demand is the same, people are willing to pay more. These are the general basic principles of economics from which everything else is based.